So let's start by talking about this trend of revenge spending. What is it, and has this ever happened before in Canada?
Well, let's start with the second question. Yes. As my eldest daughter said to me some time ago, she's 25, she said her generation is just hanging on in the hopes that this will be the roaring 20s all over again. So when people have gone through a period of deprivation, and while what we've been through hasn't been pleasant, it wasn't the First World War. When people have been through a period of deprivation, there is this sense they want to cut loose and enjoy the world. And so, yes, it has happened again. So I think the difference is the 1920s, much of the spending went to enjoyment. When we got through the Second World War, much of the spending went to infrastructure. I think that we'll be seeing more of the former, less of the latter. I don't know that we're building a lot of infrastructure. A lot more of it's going to transitory pleasures.
Now, according to Statistics Canada, Canadians saved $211 billion just last year, and that's compared to $18 billion in 2019. So that's a huge jump, Brendan. What do you think is the cause of this increase in savings?
I think the largest cause would be statistics. Because it seems a big number that Canadians would save more than 10 times as much during the last year. If that statistic even approximates correct, then I would say that it was because there was A, nothing to spend it on, but B, I think a degree of fear of missing out. We've seen, for example, the stock market do surprisingly well, and there's been a huge increase in retail participation. Flesh and blood human beings as opposed to institutions, retail participation in the stock market. So people have been afraid of missing out on this stock market boom that we've been experiencing since the bottom of the pandemic in April of last year.
And now that Canadians are revenge spending, what is at risk here for them and the overall economy if there is a spike in spending right after the pandemic? You know, some might think that this would be good for the economy.
Yes, it can be good for the economy, and it's probably better than austerity. But the issue is inflation. If there is huge demand and supply continues to be constrained, because as much as we're coming out of the pandemic, and the U.S. is already out of the pandemic, the rest of the world is still in the thick of it, and the rest of the world is where we get most of our stuff. So if there is going to be a supply constraint and a huge increase in demand, this is inflationary. Why this is a problem is a lot of the spending is predicated on interest rates being very, very low. And rising inflation tends to also push up interest rates. And I don't know that people can afford at 5 or 7% what they can afford at 1 or 2% interest rates.
So what would be your advice for people who are caught up in revenge spending?
Put some money aside every month. Whatever you can slightly not afford, slightly notice, whether it's 100, 200, 500, 1,000, or whatever the number is, do some sort of monthly contribution plan. Yes, into a mutual fund, and into a mutual fund that can grow. Because that way you're going to be putting aside and not spending 100% of it. Like the wealthy barber said all those years ago, pay yourself first, and then go out and support your local businesses. But pay yourself first. Something that will have you some savings in a few months or a few years when you need to rely on it.
All right, Brendan, just about 45 seconds left, but we know you're a fan of Robert Kiyosaki's book, Rich Dad, Poor Dad. So what themes can we use from the book to help us when we're faced with a spend versus save decision?
The biggest thing in that book, the biggest theme is that people buy what are liabilities, boats, cars, houses that are actually, they call them assets, but they're really liabilities. Take some of your revenge spending money and buy something that will generate cash for you. Hence the investment I suggested, mutual funds, but something that will generate cash revenue for you. Those are actual assets. So if you're afraid of missing out, don't necessarily go out and buy liabilities. Go and buy some assets, something that'll spin out cash for you for years to come. Thank you.
All right, Brendan, thank you again for your time on Forum Daily. We'll see you again next week.
Thanks, Nima.
Stay tuned. More international news coming up after the break on Forum Daily.